I'm using God as a definition for creation or a creator, whatever it is that made us. I'm here, therefore something had to have created me. And whatever that thing is that created me, I have the respect and the admiration for it to utilize the tools that it's given me. My mind, my emotions, my morality, the things that are within me, to be able to address the things that's how I find my relationship with it. Not through a book that some man wrote.
You are a student here.
I graduated, but yeah.
You paid a ton of money to read books.
Sure.
You paid a ton of money to have women and men lecture and teach you.
Sure.
So you accept the fact that we can pass knowledge on verbally and in writing.
Sure, and I accept the fact that you can also make mistakes in that knowledge.
Right.
And that's the reason I stand behind science, because science is not about trusting, it's about distrusting. It's about criticizing and finding where you're wrong. Whereas religion says just the opposite. It says believe.
Well, I don't believe in the religion you just described. I believe in a God who gave us a rational mind to use. And because we live in a world where truth and error and right and wrong are so intertwined,
Sure.
we must be skeptics. That is why Jesus said, beware of false prophets.
Sure.
They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. That attracts me to Christ, because Christ did not say, blindly believe. Christ said, use your mind, use your critical thinking, and analyze accurately, and learn to distinguish between truth and error, good and evil, because they are so intertwined in this world that if you are not skeptical, you will get ripped off.
So I believe in what you're saying, your Christ figure, but that's not your Christians. That's not what you're advocating here. What you're saying Christ advocated is essentially science, to look at things and be skeptical, and to question other people and question their fallibility, and come to the conclusion that they are fallible. So where exactly do you come about to say to place the Bible at the foundation of your thinking, rather than place reality at the foundation of your thinking?
Sir, I don't study the Bible to prepare for my calculus exam. I don't study the Bible to prepare for my biology exam.
Why do you study it?
I don't study the Bible to prepare for my history exam. I investigate the New Testament to find out, is there historical evidence to support the trustworthiness of Jesus Christ, or is there no historical evidence that can really support the trustworthiness of Christ? And I definitely don't believe in God because the Bible says God. I believe in God because the evidence of order and design, reason, life coming from life, not from non-life, convinces me that it's far more reasonable, not that I can prove it, but it's far more reasonable to believe in the beginning God than it is for me to believe in the beginning hydrogen. I start with, first of all, does the evidence point to some type of God existing? You've heard me because you were standing right behind the guy who I gave the evidence.
Sure.
None of it had to do with any Bible verse. None of it had to do with Jesus. I don't believe God exists because of Jesus. I believe God exists because the evidence that I see around me, that I observe, points to the existence of some type of God. Then, after I reach a point where I think that God exists, I then ask the second question, which is, who is God? Is it possible to know God? Obviously, if God remains silent or if God lies, I will never have the privilege of knowing him. The same way, if you remain silent or if you lie, I will never have the privilege of getting to know you.
Can I make a comment on that? In the same way that, you know, if you look at a painting, or if you look at a piece of pottery, or you look at an example of a piece of something that somebody's made, whether it be a building or whatever it happens to be, would you also say that you can't get to know that person? Because for me, I'm an artist and I see things as in, if I look at another artist's work, I can get a very deep understanding of the things that that person's trying to say. In the same way, if I look at God, that's the creator of all of these things, in your case, let's refer to that as God, I can come to an understanding of some of the things that they were saying or that they are meaning. And I see that in the way that Einstein and many other scientists and thinkers from Galileo to Carl Sagan, that there's a relationship that you build with your creator by looking at creation. And that's something to your second point, but if you wanted to go on, no worries. And actually one other thing, you were saying about when you gave the 4 reasons to the guy before, I don't know, or 2 before, you say now that you didn't refer to Jesus in those 4 reasons, but if I recall correctly, all 4 of those reasons were actually based around the goodness of Jesus and the good things that he had done. I actually didn't hear a single argument from a, if you don't mind going back into those reasons.
If there is no God, nothing produces everything. I can't believe that. Secondly, if there is no God, non-life produces life. I can't believe that. It's far more reasonable for me to believe that life comes from life, not that life comes from non-life. Thirdly, if there is no God, randomness produces fine-tuning. I can't accept that. It's illogical to me. Fourthly, if there is no God, chaos produces information. I'm sorry, that is absurd for me. Every time there's information communicated, there's got to be a rational mind. Fifthly, if there is no God, the unconscious produces the conscious. I'm sorry, that's so highly unlikely, it's incredible. Sixthly, if there is no God, non-reason produces reason. I'm sorry, that is highly implausible for me.
Okay, and you use the word implausible, which I think is a very good one, because this is actually what science says. They don't profess to say we know these things. They say this is the probability. This is pretty likely that this is the case, right? And it's fair to say that you don't see that stone becoming life. This is a very fair, reasonable assessment to say that you would say we're going to withhold any kind of judgment or knowledge there. We're going to say we simply don't know what the origins of life are, whether it came from panspermia or whether it came from some warm cesspool billions of years ago. We don't really know, and that's a fair thing, and this is where science accepts the fallibility of man and saying it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to say I don't know in these circumstances, right? And this is the reason that science says this is more probable or this is less probable. And I think that addresses most of those 6 points. I can't remember the first 2 of them now. I don't write them down. But so essentially, what I would say is science is looking at things probabilistically. And if you include these things like the Bible states, where they say this is exactly how things are, this is how tides work, or this is how these kind of things function, and this is how morality is, and this is such a strict and black and white presentation of how reality is, I think you're making an error. You're making a huge error. You're putting yourself in front of what is actually there. You're putting yourself in front of God's creation. And you're saying this is the way it is, instead of looking at creation and saying, how is it? And being open to understanding and looking at the truth. And I would say that is blindfolded faith.
I am embarrassed intellectually by Christians who try and say science proves God exists. I am equally embarrassed by atheists who say science proves that God does not exist. Guess what, sir? God is not a scientific question. If you listen closely to my 6 pieces of evidence for God's existence, not one of them was a scientific argument. They were all logical, common sense, reason arguments. Not one of them was a science argument. And it is absolutely amazing that I live in a culture where on a weekly basis, when I speak on university campuses, I have university students telling me that either science proves God exists or science disproves God's existence. They are so out to lunch, sir, it is scary. It shows they don't understand science, they don't understand philosophy, they don't understand the question of God. God is not a scientific question. God is a philosophical, theological question.
I would agree with that, but I think philosophy shows us that we should avoid paradoxes. And also philosophy shows us that we should avoid things that contradict themselves. And I believe that the omnipotence, omniscience, and all the other things that God purports in the Bible are those. They are self-contradictory, and they do create paradoxes. And therefore, philosophically, God is also brought to question. But if you would like to say that it is purely a theological place, that, you know, if it's something that somebody needs to hold on to because they're not able to look at reality for what it is, that's one thing, and that's perfectly reasonable from a psychological standpoint. But I don't think it's reasonable from a standpoint of two rational minds, or of rational minds at all.
Every single week that I speak on a high school campus or a university campus, I have a group of students who inevitably say to me, unless you can scientifically prove something, it's not true. That is self-defeating. That is self-contradictory. Please prove to me scientifically that unless you can prove scientifically something, it's not true. You can't. But you see, that's a philosophy. It's a philosophy that many of you guys have bought. Hook, line, and sinker. Not saying you, but I hear it. I've heard it this week many times. All right? That science proves that God exists, or science disproves that God exists. Baloney. Science has nothing to say about whether God exists or not. God is not a scientific question. Science is concerned about observable phenomenon, the repeatability of an experiment. If you can't repeat it in Austin and in London and in New Delhi, it's not scientifically true. You've got to be able to repeat it. Now, guess what? I am convinced that there's something far more important in your life than science. I am convinced that what's far more important in your life than science is your friendships. And not one of your friendships is based on science. I hope your friendships do include common sense, logic, and reason. Meaning by that, I hope you don't just trust anybody with your wallet. I hope you don't just trust anybody with your life. I hope instead that you gather evidence that people are reliable, people of integrity, and you learn to trust them. You learn to go beyond the evidence and trust them. That's the way you develop a friendship, guys. It's the only way you're going to develop a marriage and a family. By gathering evidence that this woman is reliable, you make a commitment to her, and you enjoy building a relationship with her. So I applaud science. I love science. Science is based on modern science is based on the Judeo-Christian view of reality. But there is so much more to reality than science. There are relationships. There's history, historical knowledge. You don't scientifically prove to me by getting Washington back here on this campus in a lab that he was inaugurated first president of the United States. Rather, you study eyewitness testimony and you gain historical knowledge. It's another wonderful branch of knowledge. So knowledge has many different branches, all of which are great, but don't limit reality to this science.
And I would agree with you entirely. I don't think science is the end-all, be-all. But to go back to, I mean, for history and these kind of things, it's definitely something that can be debated between different people. I mean, you, for example, said that Abraham Lincoln is someone that you would look up to, or that you would posit as someone that is someone that, you know, is a good figure in history. I would argue otherwise. But to go back to relationships,
You must be a Southern.
I just think that, you know, holding a nation state together for the sake of holding it together is violence towards the individual. But this is neither here nor there. But let me digress back to what you were saying about relationships, right? If we take the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament both, this God creature, or this Judeo-Christian God, is not someone that I would want to have a relationship with. Someone that destroys entire cities because there are people that he disagrees with, because they are homosexual, or they are whatever it happens to be. That's not someone that I would want to associate with. If there was someone that was here today that thought those same kind of things, I would disassociate with them entirely. Period. And if
where does the Bible say that God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah just because of their homosexual practice?
he destroyed them because he couldn't find a single or 50 or whatever it was people that weren't sinners or that weren't.
Well,
I haven't read the Bible in a very long time.
That's unfortunate then, if you're going to tell me that you don't like the God of the Bible if you've not read it. We have a breakdown.
I haven't read it.
All right, well, sir,
recently.
I can promise you, Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed simply because there were some homosexuals practicing homosexual sex.
What was it destroyed for?
There was gang rape going on as well.
So everyone in the entire city, everyone in the entire city was guilty of that.
No, but an incredibly high percentage of that population was doing incredible evil.
I find that really difficult to believe that a majority of a population would be acting violently towards other members in society, because the society would fall to pieces that quickly.
What's ISIS doing?
Destroying areas.
Yeah.
Do you think the people that
What's
are
ISIS
staying
doing?
there? Do you think they're
you're telling me that they're not a bunch of people really committed to evil. What's ISIS doing?
Is that a community? Is that a town? Is that
It's a group of people.
Village or a city?
It's a large group of people.
Sure, and they're destroying and wreaking havoc on a community, on a large community.
So what is your emotional and intellectual response to ISIS? Do you get angry?
As anyone else would, sure. If
Is
there's
that
people
anger
innocents,
contradicting
absolutely.
your love, or is that anger because you love?
I think it's because I'm an ethical person.
Good. Bravo. I get angry if someone pulls a knife on you and seeks to destroy your life.
Sure.
Why do I get angry with them? Because I love you and respect you, and I'm convinced you have innate value, and therefore if anybody tries to knife you, I'm going to be angry with them, so angry I'm going to try and physically stop them.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
To love means you get involved, and you get angry if you watch people destroying other people. If I watch you get knifed and ask, what am I having for dinner? I don't give a rip about you. I'm so self-absorbed, I'm just into my dinner. God gets angry about evil because evil is the destruction of other people. And I sure hope that when you are confronted by people destroying people, you don't ask what you're having for dinner. Instead, you get angry. And then you seek to harness that anger and do something constructive to prevent the slaughter of innocent people.
Okay, can I posit a theoretical situation here? Let's bring ISIS back into the situation. Let's say all of the members of ISIS are in a city, right? Let's say a city of however big Sodom and Gomorrah was, right? And let's say they're invading this, and they're the majority of, let's say, a village, right? God could select the people that He wanted to destroy. Why is it that God goes and does that kind of thing? And those are the kind of things that I would say make it where I would not want to have a relationship with someone that was like God. Jesus, on the other hand, I have a disagreement. I like a lot of the stuff Jesus said. He seemed like a pretty cool guy. But
Jesus claimed to be revealing God accurately. If you like Jesus, believe in Him. Believe in the God Jesus revealed.
I believe in some of His actions. I don't believe in everything that someone says. I believe that, there's many things that Einstein or Carl Sagan said. Doesn't mean I believe every single thing that they said.
Okay, why don't you believe that when Jesus claimed to be God, He was speaking the truth? God in human form, He claimed to be. Why do you think He wasn't speaking the truth?
The same reason if Carl Sagan said he could fly without any kind of mechanism, I'd be like, you're probably full of crap, because the reality around me shows otherwise. And I trust reality more than I would ever trust a man.
Well, Jesus lives an amazing life, sinless life.
So did Gandhi, so did a lot of other people, so did Muhammad, so did so many other martyrs and so many other people. That why do we not treat them the same way that we would treat Jesus? A lot of people actually make better arguments for moral codes than Jesus gave. A lot. Rothbard, for example, if you read Rothbard, you should. He's a good philosopher.
One of the reasons I respect Gandhi is because he was very open and honest about his racist attitudes when he lived in South Africa. Gandhi never claimed to be morally perfect. One of the reasons I respect Dr. Martin Luther King is because he was very brutally honest about his own sins and his own mistakes and failures in life. Jesus Christ made the audacious claim that He never sinned. His enemies could not point to a sin in His life, and the Apostle John, who knew Him intimately, could write of Him, "In Him is no sin." I respect that highly. I think we all should, because the evidence is he lived a life like nobody else. Nobody else.
They also didn't have Facebook and the internet and all the things that you could track somebody's life quite easily. Back then it was quite private, those kind of things. And not to say that, you know, if you believe that Jesus is perfect, then I'm not going to change your mind about it. But I also
that's
don't
the eyewitness testimony. The eyewitness testimony is he lived a perfect life. It's not my belief. It's what you can read for yourself in John chapter 8 and in 1 John chapter 3.
I think eyewitness testimony can be complete hearsay. It's not admissible in court. It shouldn't be admissible in your mind.
It's not admissible in court?
Not fully.
Sir, you can go to prison and you can go to the electric chair based on eyewitness testimony.
No, you can't. There has to be evidence.
Yeah, and that's based on eyewitness testimony.
If there is evidence and eyewitness testimony, this is the thing that can put you in jail. If it's purely eyewitness testimony, good luck. But I wanted to also point out that ethics. One other thing I wrote about ethics in here. Okay, to accept that we require a book and men to be nailed to crosses to understand where our moral compasses point is to place little to no faith in what created us. Ethics is a result of evolution favoring social order, not men being nailed to crosses. Through social order, we get the specialization of labor, we get trade, we get bricklayers, watchmakers, bakers, and scientists. We get jackets when it's cold and running water when we thirst. We get hunters and gatherers and iPhones and spaceships. We get doctors and clergymen, philosophers and teachers. We don't get ethics from these things. We owe ethics for these things. It's why man is man. It is how nature has sculpted us. And I think this stands in the face of a lot that what Christians generally say about ethics, that ethics is somehow you looking at and trying to trust and force your way into something that Jesus or some other entity or some other creature has told you how to live. I don't think that's the case. I think evolution has selected mankind, has chosen Homo sapiens over Homo erectus and over Neanderthals, not because we're more intellectually superior to Neanderthals. Some evidence is showing that we actually weren't. That the evidence is now pointing to the facts that why humanity was able to survive when the other Neanderthals and Homo erectus was not, is because we acted as a community. We acted as a society. We allowed ourselves to become individualized and specialized and trade with one another. And that allowed us to survive. Not because we're somehow superior or whatever. It's because of ethics that we stand here today.
Thank you very much.
It's a good conversation.
Good to meet you. I'm Cliff. You're
Paul.
Paul, good to meet you. The amazing complexity of the universe points to a brilliant creator. The beauty of the universe points to an amazingly creative God. But what does this God expect of you and me? Does it matter how you and I live our lives? According to Jesus Christ, it does matter how you live your life and how I live my life. Why? Because according to Jesus Christ, God created you and me for a purpose. And that purpose is to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Is the purpose of Christianity to follow rules? No. The purpose of Christianity is to love God, to trust Christ, to develop a spiritual relationship with Him. But then there are rules. What's the purpose of those rules? To put the guardrails up to define what it means practically to love God and to love people. That's what Paul writes in Romans chapter 13. The commandments, do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet, and whatever other commandment there may be, are summed up in this one rule: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to its neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law. If I think that I can love you and steal from you, I'm a hurting pup. To love someone means to respect them and their property. Stealing is not an option. If I think I can love you and lie to you, I'm a hurting, disillusioned individual. For you as a human being created in the image of God deserve to be told the truth, deserve to live in reality in your relationship with me and with others. If you and I think that we can commit adultery in the name of love, we have misdefined love. Love is not using a person to get a vicarious sexual thrill in pornography, in lust, or in adultery or premarital sex. God has given us the ability to love, and love demands commitment. Love invites commitment. Bill Gates was right. The complexity and the beauty of this world points us to God. And it's the beauty of Jesus Christ that melts our hearts and draws us to Him. That's why you need to read the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to investigate what was Jesus really like? What was Jesus really all about? And in those Gospels you'll read how He touched the untouchable lepers. He reached out and healed lepers. He opened the eyes of blind people. Confronted by hungry people, He didn't ask, "What's for dinner for me?" Instead, He fed the hungry. Confronted by people who were emotionally scarred and hurting, He poured His love into them. When you read the Gospels, when you get an accurate picture of who Jesus is, you will be overwhelmed by His beauty, His amazing graciousness, His incredible love, His amazing integrity, honesty, and truthfulness. Allow the beauty, the magnificence of Christ to melt your heart. Then you can respond to Him by putting your faith and trust in Him, not because you've been hoodwinked, tricked by some religious fanatic. No, quite to the contrary, because your eyes have been opened to the beauty, the magnificence of Jesus Christ. When Jesus was arrested, the Apostle Peter took out a sword and sliced off the ear of one of the servants of the men who was arresting Christ. Christ looked at Peter, one of His best friends, said, "No, Peter, put up your sword." He picked up the ear and put it back on the side of Malchus's head. Peter followed Christ to where He was tried. Outside the house of Annas and Caiaphas, Peter denied knowing Christ 3 times. The cock crowed 3 times. Jesus came out, looked Peter in the face. Peter must have been decimated, and he runs off weeping into the night. But after the resurrection, Jesus comes and finds Peter, obviously very intentionally. And Jesus asked Peter the penetrating question, "Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me?" And Peter's eyes were opened again to the amazing beauty, the amazing graciousness, the amazing forgiveness, the amazing acceptance and approval of the living God, the Lord Jesus Christ. How is it with you? Have you turned to Christ, asking Him for forgiveness? Have you put your faith and trust in Him and allowed Him to tie you into an eternal love relationship with the living God? That is what He wants to do for you today. If you've never put your faith in Christ, why not right now, in the quietness of your soul, ask Christ to forgive you, trust in Him, and commit your life to Him. God bless you as you make that most important decision.